Grace wiped the sweat from her forehead as she carefully arranged her paintings on the dusty ground beside the busy Lagos road. Cars honked loudly as they passed by, and the smell of exhaust fumes mixed with the aroma of roasted corn from nearby vendors. "Come and see fine paintings," she called out, her voice barely audible over the traffic noise. "I can draw your face in 5 minutes." A woman in a bright yellow dress stopped and picked up one of Grace's paintings, a beautiful sunset over Victoria Island. "How much is this one?" the woman asked, examining the artwork closely. "Just 2,000 naira, ma," Grace replied hopefully. The woman frowned. 2,000? For this small thing? You children of nowadays, you think money grows on trees. I can get a poster from the market for 500 naira. Grace's heart sank as the woman dropped the painting and walked away, muttering under her breath about these street children and their expensive dreams. Grace had been living on the streets of Lagos for 3 years now, ever since she ran away from the orphanage on her 16th birthday. The orphanage workers had made it clear she was a burden, always sick, always needing medicine they couldn't afford, and completely unadoptable. "Grace, you're 19 now," Sister Mary had told her on that final day. "We've done our best, but you need to find your own way. There are younger children who need this space more than you do." The memory still stung. Not one person had come looking for her when she left. Not one man. But Grace had discovered something magical about herself. She could paint anything she saw or imagined. Her hands seemed to move on their own when she held a brush, creating beautiful pictures that made people stop and stare. A yellow Danfo bus pulled up at the traffic light, packed with passengers. Grace quickly grabbed her sketch pad and a piece of charcoal. Through the window, she spotted a middle-aged man in a blue shirt, looking tired from a long day at work. Within minutes, she had sketched his face perfectly, capturing even the small worry lines around his eyes. She knocked gently on the bus window. "Sir, sir," she called out, "I drew your picture." The man looked down and his eyes widened in surprise. The drawing looked exactly like him. "This is amazing," he exclaimed, reaching into his pocket. "How much?" "Anything you can give, sir," Grace said with a smile. He handed her a 1,000 naira note through the window just as the bus started moving. "God bless you, my daughter," he shouted as the bus pulled away. Grace clutched the money tightly. 1,000 naira meant she could eat for the next 3 days. But her happiness was short-lived. The next bus that stopped was not so kind. Grace had quickly sketched a stern-looking woman in traditional dress. But when she approached the window, the woman's face twisted with anger. "What is this?" the woman screamed, snatching the drawing from Grace's hands. "You think you can bewitch me with this drawing? Witch? Did they send you from my village to test me?" Before Grace could explain, the woman slapped her hard across the face. Grace stumbled backward and fell to the ground. "Tell them you didn't see me," the woman continued shouting, tearing the drawing into tiny pieces and throwing them at Grace. "Useless child. Go and find work instead of practicing witchcraft on innocent people." The other passengers on the bus just stared as the woman continued her tirade. Some even nodded in agreement. "These street children are becoming too much," one passenger said. "Drawing people without permission. What kind of behavior is that?" Grace picked herself up from the ground, her cheek still stinging from the slap. She was used to this kind of treatment by now. Some people appreciated her art, others saw it as something evil or creepy. "It's okay," she whispered to herself, the same words she'd been saying for years. "Tomorrow will be better." She gathered her remaining paintings and found a quiet spot under a bridge to spend the night. As she arranged her thin blanket on the cardboard she used as a mattress, she looked up at the stars and made the same wish she'd been making every night. "Please, God, let someone see that my art is special. Let someone give me a chance to make something beautiful." Meanwhile, across town in the wealthy neighborhood of Victoria Island, a very different kind of drama was unfolding in the Malcolm family mansion. "David Malcolm Jr., Mr. Malcolm's voice boomed through the marble halls of their home. "Get down here this instant!" 22-year-old David slowly made his way down the grand staircase, each step feeling heavier than the last. He knew exactly what this was about. His father stood in the living room holding a letter from the Lagos Academy of Fine Arts. Mr. Malcolm was a tall, imposing man who commanded respect wherever he went. His paintings hung in galleries across the world, and wealthy people paid millions just to own a small piece signed with his name. "Explain this to me," Mr. Malcolm said, waving the letter in the air. "Your professors are threatening to expel you for lack of creativity and effort." "Expel you? My son, from an art school?" David's mother, Mrs. Malcolm, sat quietly on the velvet sofa, her manicured fingers nervously playing with her expensive jewelry. She never defended David when her husband got angry. "Dad, I tried to tell you," David said quietly. "I don't want to be a painter. I want to be a chef. I love cooking and I'm good at it. Why can't you just let me follow my dreams?" Mr. Malcolm's face turned red with anger. "Your dreams. Your dreams. What about the family legacy? What about the Malcolm name that has been respected in the art world for 5 generations? You want to throw all of that away to flip burgers? It's not just flipping burgers, Dad. Cooking is an art form too. I could open my own restaurant, create beautiful dishes." "Enough!" Mr. Malcolm slammed his fist on the glass coffee table, making everyone in the room jump. "I don't want to hear another word about this cooking nonsense. You are a Malcolm, and Malcolms are artists." End of discussion. David felt tears building up in his eyes, but he refused to cry in front of his father. He'd learned long ago that showing emotion only made things worse. "The school has given you 1 month," Mr. Malcolm continued, his voice cold and threatening. 1 month to submit 3 original creative pieces that prove you deserve to stay. If you fail, not only will you be expelled, but I will cut you off from this family completely. No inheritance, no family name, no support. You'll be on your own. David's mother finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Honey, maybe that's a bit harsh." "Harsh?" Mr. Malcolm turned to his wife. "You know what's harsh? Having a son who wants to disgrace our family name. Having a son who doesn't appreciate the opportunities we've given him." David looked at his mother, hoping she would defend him just this once. But she just looked down at her hands and said nothing. "I understand, sir," David said formally, the way his father had taught him to speak. "I'll do my best to create the pieces they want." "You better," Mr. Malcolm replied, "because if you don't, you are no son of mine." That night, David sat in his bedroom, which was bigger than most people's entire homes, staring at a blank canvas. He'd been trying to paint something, anything, for hours, but his mind was completely empty. He thought about the conversation with his father and felt a familiar weight in his chest. Ever since he was a child, everything had been about the family reputation. He'd never been allowed to just be himself. His phone buzzed with a tap from his best friend, Tunde. "How did it go with your dad?" David typed back, "Terrible. He threatened to disown me if I don't pass my art assessments." "That's crazy, man. Can't you just paint something simple and get it over with?" "It's not that easy. The professors want creative and original work. Everything I paint looks like a child did it." "Maybe you should get some inspiration from somewhere. Go to art galleries, look at other people's work." David stared at Tunde's message for a long time. Maybe his friend was right. Maybe he needed to see what real creativity looked like. The next evening, David asked his driver to take him around the city. He didn't have a destination in mind. He just wanted to get out of the house and think. As they drove through the busy streets of Lagos, David watched the city life through his tinted window. Street vendors sold everything from phone accessories to fresh fruit. Children played football in small spaces between buildings. Life was happening everywhere, and for the first time in a long time, David felt curious about the world outside his wealthy bubble. "Sir, there's heavy traffic ahead," his driver, Mr. Ibrahim, said. "Should I take another route?" "No, it's fine," David replied. "I'm not in a hurry." As they sat in traffic, David noticed something that made him sit up straight. A young girl with paint-stained clothes was moving between the cars, showing people what looked like drawings or paintings. "Mr. Ibrahim, can you roll down the window?" David asked. "Sir?" "Just roll it down. I want to see something." As the window came down, David could hear the girl calling out, "Beautiful paintings. I can draw anything you want. Very cheap price." When she reached their car, David got a closer look at her work. His jaw dropped. The painting she was holding was incredible. a vibrant scene of Lego street life that seemed to jump off the paper. Every detail was perfect, from the expressions on people's faces to the way the sunlight hit the buildings. "Excuse me," David called out. "Can I see that painting?" Grace hurried over to the expensive-looking car, her heart racing with hope. The young man inside looked wealthy. Maybe he would buy something. "Good evening, sir," she said politely. "I have many beautiful paintings. This one shows Lagos market life, very colorful and full of energy." David took the painting from her hands and examined it closely. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. This street girl had more talent in her little finger than he had in his entire body. This is amazing," he said honestly. "How much do you want for it?" Grace's eyes lit up. "Just 2,000 naira, sir." David almost laughed. 2,000 naira? His father spent more than that on a single cup of coffee. "What about the others?" he asked. "Do you have more paintings?" Grace quickly showed him her other 4 paintings. Each one was a masterpiece. Beautiful, creative, and full of life. David felt a mixture of amazement and jealousy. This girl had everything he lacked: talent, creativity, and genuine passion for art. "I'll take all of them," David said, reaching for his wallet. Grace couldn't believe her ears. "All of them, sir?" "Yes, all 5. How much for everything?" Grace quickly calculated in her head. 10,000 naira for all 5, sir." David pulled out a bundle of cash and handed her 20,000 naira. "Sir, this is too much," Grace said, trying to give some money back. "Keep it," David said with a smile. "Your work is worth much more than that." Grace stared at the money in her hands. 20,000 naira. She hadn't made that much in 2 months combined. "Thank you so much, sir. God bless you. You have made my whole week," she said, her face glowing with happiness. As the traffic cleared and their car started moving, David clutched the paintings tightly. For the first time in weeks, he felt hopeful. These paintings were exactly what he needed to impress his professors. The next morning, David walked into Lagos Academy of Fine Arts with Grace's paintings carefully tucked under his arm. He found Professor Adebayo, the head of the Fine Arts Department, in his office. "David," Professor Adebayo said, looking up from his papers, "I hope you have something good to show me. The board is getting impatient with your lack of progress." "I do, sir," David replied, trying to sound confident. "I've been working very hard on these pieces." He laid out Grace's paintings one by one on the professor's desk. Professor Adebayo's expression changed immediately. He picked up each painting, examining them carefully. "David, these are extraordinary," the professor said slowly. "The technique, the emotion, the creativity, this is exactly what we've been trying to get you to produce." David nodded, feeling guilty but also relieved. "The way you've captured the essence of Lagos street life here," Professor Adebayo continued, pointing to one of the paintings, "and this use of color and light. David, I had no idea you had this level of talent hidden inside you." "Thank you, sir," David managed to say. "I'm going to recommend these for the student exhibition next month. The board will be very impressed. You might even win the Creativity Award." David left the professor's office feeling like he was walking on air. Finally, his father would be proud of him. Finally, he could stay in school and avoid being disowned. That evening at dinner, Mr. Malcolm was in the best mood David had seen him in for months. "The professor called me personally," Mr. Malcolm said, cutting into his expensive steak. "He said your paintings were some of the best student work he's seen in years. I knew you had it in you, son. The Malcolm genes always come through eventually." David's mother smiled at him for the first time in weeks. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. I knew you just needed to apply yourself." David smiled back, but inside he felt terrible. These weren't his paintings. He was living a lie, and every compliment made him feel worse. But as weeks passed and the assessments kept coming, David realized he had a bigger problem. The professors expected him to keep producing work at the same level. They wanted new paintings, new creative pieces, and David couldn't deliver. He tried painting on his own, but everything he created looked flat and lifeless compared to Grace's work. He was back to square one, but now the expectations were even higher. "I need to find that girl again," he told himself one evening as he stared at another failed attempt at painting. "Maybe I can buy more of her work." For 3 days, David had his driver take him to different parts of Lagos, looking for Grace. They searched traffic stops, bus stations, and market areas, but she was nowhere to be found. On the fourth day, just when David was starting to give up hope, they spotted her at a traffic light near Acacia. "There she is," David told Mr. Ibrahim. "Pull over there." David got out of the car and walked over to Grace, who was sitting on a small stool, painting a new picture. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you remember me?" "I bought your paintings last week." Grace looked up and smiled. "Oh, yes. The nice gentleman who paid me extra money. How are you, sir?" "I'm fine, thank you. Listen, I have a proposition for you." Grace put down her brush, curious. "I need more paintings like the ones you sold me," David continued. "But this time I want to make it a regular business arrangement. I'll pay you 100,000 naira for each painting you create for me." Grace's mouth fell open. 100,000 naira? Sir, are you serious? Very serious, but there are conditions. The paintings have to be original, creative, and high quality. And David hesitated, knowing how this would sound. "I need you to paint them in my studio so I can watch and learn your techniques." Grace's mind was racing. 100,000 naira per painting? She could rent a proper room, buy better art supplies, maybe even save money for the future. "Sir, this is not a scam, right?" she asked suspiciously. "You're not a ritualist or anything like that? Because I'm an orphan, so your plans won't work on me." David couldn't help but laugh. "I'm not a ritualist. I just really need your help. I'm an art student, and I'm struggling with creativity. Your work could teach me a lot." Grace studied his face carefully. He seemed genuine, and the money he'd paid her before was real. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll do it. But you have to pay him half the money up front." "Deal," David said, pulling out his phone. "Let me transfer 50,000 naira to your account right now." "Sir, I don't have a bank account," Grace said quietly. David realized how sheltered his life had been. Of course, a street girl wouldn't have a bank account. "That's okay. I'll give you cash. Can you come with me now to see the studio?" Grace looked at her small collection of art supplies and nodded. "Let me pack my things." As they drove toward the Victoria Island, Grace pressed her face against the window, watching the city change from crowded streets to wide roads lined with palm trees and expensive houses. "Sir, where exactly are we going?" she asked as they entered a gated community with security guards. "My family's house," David replied. "Don't worry, it's safe." "My parents aren't home right now." When they arrived at the Malcolm mansion, Grace couldn't believe her eyes. The house was bigger than the entire orphanage where she'd grown up. The gates alone looked more expensive than anything she'd ever owned. "Sir, are you sure I'm allowed to enter this place?" she asked nervously. "Of course," David said, but he was also nervous. He'd never brought anyone from outside his social circle to the house before. David led Grace through the marble foyer, past crystal chandeliers and oil paintings worth more than most people made in a year. Grace walked carefully, afraid to touch anything. "This is my studio," David said, opening a door to reveal a room that made Grace gasp. The studio was like an artist's paradise. There were easels, canvases of every sort, paint tubes in every color imaginable, brushes of every type, and professional lighting that made everything look perfect. "Sir, all of this is yours," Grace whispered. "Yes, my father had it built for me when I started art school. Pretty nice, right?" Grace just nodded, unable to speak. She'd been painting with cheap watercolors and used brushes, and here was more art supplies than she'd ever dreamed of seeing. "Are you hungry?" David asked, noticing how thin Grace looked. "Our cook can make you something to eat." "You have a cook?" Grace asked in amazement. "Of course, let me call her." Within minutes, Grace was sitting at a table, eating the most delicious food she'd ever tasted in her life. There was jollof rice, fried chicken, plantains, salad, and fresh juice. She tried to eat politely, but she was so hungry that she couldn't help herself. "Take your time," David said kindly. "There's plenty more if you want." After Grace finished eating, she felt ready to paint. David set up a canvas for her and arranged all the supplies she might need. "What would you like me to paint?" Grace asked. "Anything," David replied. "Something creative and original." something that shows emotion. Grace looked around the beautiful studio, then at David's kind face, and suddenly she knew exactly what to paint. She picked up a brush and began to work. David watched in amazement as Grace's painting came to life. She painted with such confidence and skill that it looked effortless. Her hands moved quickly, but precisely, and within 2 hours she had created a stunning piece that showed a young woman stepping out of darkness into light. "It's about hope," Grace explained as she put the finishing touches on the painting. "About believing that tomorrow can be better than today, even when everything seems impossible." David stared at the painting, feeling emotional. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "It's exactly what I needed." He paid Grace the full 100,000 naira in cash, and she could barely contain her excitement. "Sir, thank you so much," she said. "This changes everything for me." "Can you come back on Wednesday?" David asked. "Same time?" "Yes, sir. I'll be here." As David's driver took Grace back to her part of town, she clutched the money tightly and made plans for her new life. She could rent a small room, buy better clothes, maybe even get a phone. For the first time since leaving the orphanage, Grace felt like her dreams might actually come true. Over the next few months, Grace and David fell into a routine. 3 times a week, she would come to his studio and create beautiful paintings while he watched and asked questions. She taught him techniques, explained her thought process, and slowly David's own painting skills began to improve. But more than that, they became friends. Grace's cheerful personality and determined spirit impressed David, while his kindness and genuine interest in her art made Grace feel valued for the first time in her life. "You know," Grace said one Wednesday afternoon as she worked on a painting of children playing in the rain, "you're not as bad at painting as you think. Your color mixing has gotten much better." David smiled. "That's because I have a good teacher." "Why don't you want to be an artist anyway?" Grace asked. "Your family is famous for it. Most people would kill for this opportunity." David sighed, "Because it's not my choice. I've never been allowed to choose anything for myself. My whole life has been planned out since I was born. Which schools to attend, which friends to have, what career to pursue. I just want to do something I actually love." "What do you love?" Grace asked, pausing in her painting. "Cooking," David said with a smile. "I love creating new dishes, experimenting with flavors, making people happy with food. But my father thinks it's beneath our family status." Grace shook her head. "That's so sad. Food is art too. The way you arrange it on the plate, the colors, the flavors working together. It's like painting, but you can eat it." David laughed. "Exactly. You understand. I wish my father could see it that way." "Maybe he will someday," Grace said optimistically. "People can change." As the months passed, their friendship deepened into something more. David found himself looking forward to Grace's visits more than anything else in his week. She brought life and authenticity to his privileged but empty world. Grace, meanwhile, had been able to rent a small but clean room in a safe neighborhood. She bought new clothes, proper art supplies, and even started taking some classes to improve her education. The money from David had changed her life completely, but neither of them realized that their secret arrangement was about to be discovered in the worst possible way. One Thursday afternoon, Mr. Malcolm decided to come home early from a business meeting. He'd been so proud of his son's recent artistic achievements that he wanted to surprise David with tickets to an art exhibition in London. As he walked through the house, he heard voices coming from David's studio. Thinking his son might be on a video call with his professors, Mr. Malcolm decided to peek in and say hello. What he saw made his blood run cold. A young, poorly dressed girl was standing at an easel, painting a beautiful landscape while his son sat nearby, watching and taking notes. David was asking her questions about brush techniques and color theory, clearly learning from her rather than teaching. Mr. Malcolm stood frozen in the doorway, understanding dawning on him like a physical blow. The paintings that had made him so proud, the work that had impressed the professors, the creativity that had supposedly saved his son's academic career. None of it was David's work. "What?" Mr. Malcolm said in a low, dangerous voice, "is going on here?" Both David and Grace spun around, their faces turning pale with shock. "Dad," David stammered, This isn't what it looks like. But Mr. Malcolm's sharp eyes had already taken in the scene. Grace's paint-stained apron, the half-finished painting that matched the style of David's recent work, and the guilty expressions on both their faces. "Oh, but it is exactly what it looks like," Mr. Malcolm said, his voice getting louder. "My son, the heir to the Malcolm artistic legacy, has been cheating. You've been buying paintings from a street girl and passing them off as your own work." Grace quickly put down her brush and took a step back, sensing the danger in the situation. "David Malcolm Jr., is this true?" Mr. Malcolm demanded. David looked at Grace, then at his father, and felt all his lies crashing down around him. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "It's true." Mr. Malcolm's face turned red with rage. "Get out," he shouted at Grace. "Get out of my house this instant." "Dad, wait," David said, stepping forward. "Don't blame her. This was my idea. She was just trying to help." "Help?" Mr. Malcolm screamed. "She's been making a fool out of our entire family. Do you know what this means for our reputation if anyone finds out?" Grace grabbed her small bag and headed for the door, but Mr. Malcolm blocked her path. "If I ever see you near my son or my family again," he said in a threatening voice, "I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand me?" Grace nodded quickly, tears starting to form in her eyes. "Dad, please," David said desperately. "She doesn't deserve this. I'm the one who asked her to help me." "You're right," Mr. Malcolm said, turning his fury back to his son. "You are the one to blame, and you will face the consequences." Grace managed to slip past Mr. Malcolm and ran out of the house, her heart breaking. She'd never been spoken to so cruelly, and she could hear David calling her name as she ran down the long driveway. That evening, Mr. Malcolm sat down with his wife and told her everything he'd discovered. Mrs. Malcolm listened with growing concern. "This is a disaster," she said when he finished. "If the school finds out, if the art community finds out, our reputation will be ruined." "I know," Mr. Malcolm said grimly, "but I have an idea. A way to turn this situation to our advantage." Mrs. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "That girl is incredibly talented," Mr. Malcolm said slowly. "What if instead of exposing our son's cheating, we secure her talents exclusively for our family?" "I don't understand." Mr. Malcolm leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a plan that was both brilliant and cruel. "What if we offer her a contract? A binding legal agreement that makes everything she paints automatically belong to David. We could provide for her, give her housing, education, a small allowance, and in return she would paint exclusively for us. No one would ever have to know that the work isn't David's." Mrs. Malcolm thought about this for a moment. "That's actually genius. She's poor and desperate. She'll probably agree to anything if we offer her stability." "Exactly. And the best part is it would all be completely legal. She would be essentially employed by us." "But what about David? He might not agree to this." Mr. Malcolm's expression hardened. "David will do what I tell him to do. He's lost the right to have opinions about this matter." The next morning, Mr. Malcolm called his lawyer and explained what he wanted. The lawyer, who was used to handling unusual requests from wealthy clients, didn't ask too many questions. "I'll draft a comprehensive contract," the lawyer said. "But Mr. Malcolm, this kind of agreement, it's essentially making the girl an artistic slave. Are you sure this is what you want?" "I'm sure," Mr. Malcolm replied coldly. "Just make sure it's completely legal and binding." While the lawyer worked on the contract, Mr. Malcolm and his wife began planning how they would approach Grace. They decided to make the offer seem like an amazing opportunity, rather than the trap it actually was. "We'll tell her we want to be her patrons," Mrs. Malcolm suggested, "that we believe in her talent and want to help her achieve her dreams." "Perfect," Mr. Malcolm agreed. "We'll offer her an apartment, education, art supplies, everything she could want. We just won't mention that she'll essentially be signing her artistic freedom away forever." Meanwhile, David was miserable. He'd tried calling Grace multiple times, but she didn't have a phone. He'd driven to the area where he'd first found her, but she was nowhere to be seen. His parents had barely spoken to him since the incident, and when they did, it was only to remind him how disappointed they were. I've ruined everything, David thought as he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. I've lost Grace. I'm going to fail school, and my parents hate me. But David had no idea that his parents were planning something that would make the situation much, much worse. 3 days after the confrontation, Mr. and Mrs. Malcolm found Grace selling paintings at a small market in Acadia. She looked tired and sad, and when she saw them approaching, her face filled with fear. "Please," she said quickly, "I haven't contacted your son. I haven't told anyone about the arrangement. Please don't make trouble for me." "My dear," Mrs. Malcolm said in a sweet voice that David would have immediately recognized as fake, "we're not here to make trouble. We're here to offer you an opportunity." Grace looked confused. "An opportunity?" "Yes," Mr. Malcolm said, putting on his most charming smile. "We've been thinking about your situation, and we realized that we may have reacted too harshly the other day. You see, we were just shocked to discover how talented you are." Grace remained suspicious but listened. "We would like to offer you something very special," Mrs. Malcolm continued. "We want to become your patrons." "Do you know what that means?" Grace shook her head. "It means we would support your artistic career," Mr. Malcolm explained. "We would provide you with housing, education, art supplies, and a monthly allowance. All we ask in return is that you continue to create beautiful artwork." Grace's eyes widened. You want to help me?" "Yes, dear," Mrs. Malcolm said kindly. "We believe in your talent, and we want to give you the chance to develop it properly. You could go to art school, have your own studio, maybe even have exhibitions of your work someday." Grace felt tears of gratitude building in her eyes. After days of worry and sadness, this seemed like a miracle. "There would be some paperwork, of course," Mr. Malcolm added casually. "Just a simple contract to make everything official. Legal protection for both parties." "What kind of contract?" Grace asked. "Nothing complicated," Mrs. Malcolm assured her. "Just an agreement that says we'll support you and you'll create art exclusively for our family." It's quite standard in these kinds of arrangements. Grace had never heard of such arrangements, but she had no experience with contracts or legal matters. The Malcolms seemed genuine in their desire to help her, and the offer was beyond anything she'd ever dreamed of. "Can I think about it?" Grace asked. "Of course," Mr. Malcolm said, "but we'd like to finalize everything quickly so we can start helping you right away. Can you meet us tomorrow at our lawyer's office?" Grace nodded, still hardly believing this was really happening. The next day, Grace sat in a fancy lawyer's office, surrounded by people in expensive suits, speaking in legal terms she didn't understand. The contract was dozens of pages long, full of complicated language that made her head spin. "This is all standard language," the lawyer assured her when she looked confused. "Basically, it says that Mr. and Mrs. Malcolm will provide for your education and living expenses, and in return, you'll create artwork for their family." "For how long?" Grace asked. "Oh, just while you're developing your career," Mrs. Malcolm said vaguely, "until you're established as an artist." Grace read through some of the contract, but most of it was impossible for her to understand. There were terms like exclusive artistic rights, intellectual property transfer, and binding perpetual agreement that meant nothing to her. "Is this really a good deal for me?" Grace asked the lawyer. "Oh yes," the lawyer said quickly. "The Malcolms are offering you opportunities that most young artists would kill for. Full support, education, housing. It's very generous." What Grace didn't know was that buried in the legal language was a clause that gave the Malcolms ownership of every piece of art she would ever create for the rest of her life. She was essentially signing away her artistic identity forever. "Do I have to decide right now?" Grace asked, feeling overwhelmed. "We'd prefer to finalize this today," Mr. Malcolm said. "We're very excited to start helping you, and we have some opportunities lined up that are time-sensitive." Grace looked around the room at all the confident, well-dressed people who seemed so sure this was a good decision. She thought about her small rented room, her uncertain future, and the possibility of finally having stability and support. "Okay," she said finally, "I'll sign." As Grace signed her name on page after page of the contract, she felt excited about her future. Finally, someone believed in her talent, Finally, she would have the resources to create art without worrying about money or survival. What she didn't know was that she had just signed away her freedom, her artistic rights, and any chance of ever claiming credit for her own work. The Malcolms smiled as they watched her sign the final page, knowing they had just solved their family's problem in a way that would benefit them for years to come. But across town, David was about to discover what his parents had done, and his reaction would change everything. This is not the end. If you have enjoyed watching this story up to this point, please give this video a thumbs up and type part 2 in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you still haven't done so by now. See you in the next one.